We're now going to talk about the importance of developing play and imagination skills. We all know that play is part of a child's development, but why is it important in terms of a child's language development and their development of interaction and that social interaction and play with other people? Well, firstly, we know that pretend play develops alongside language development. So, for example, if you see a child picking up a toy cup and pretending to drink out of that cup, you can see that they understand what that cup or that object represents, that actually it's something that you drink out of. And this is known as symbolic understanding, that the cup or the object that they're holding represents something else, so represents a real cup. And that's all about what words are, because words are symbolic of what they stand for. So if I say glass, then that word is symbolic of a real glass. It represents that real glass. So we know that pretend play develops alongside that language development, and we can really see where they're up to with that. And a child's symbolic understanding will continue to develop further. So first of all, it will be that they pick up a real cup and pretend to drink out of it. Then they might use a miniature little cup and drink out of it. But then later on, they may even pick up something else, like a book, and pretend that it's a cup to drink out of, or even use nothing to represent that drink. So how does pretend play develop social interaction and that understanding of others? Our pretend play allows children to develop that flexibility with working and interacting with other people, because they can see that other people are perhaps doing things differently to them once they're playing together. And it allows them to problem solve and start to negotiate with each other about what's happening in the play, or what's going to be happening next. So, for example, thinking, well, we can't both be the shopkeeper, so I'll be the shopkeeper first and then you are the shopkeeper after. It also allows us to practice accepting and not accepting other people's ideas. So if they don't want to be the shopkeeper, or they want to continue being that shopkeeper, they'll need to negotiate and talk about that. It allows us to share ideas with others about what they're doing and build on ideas of other people and ask them for their thoughts. So during play, they might say, what should we use this for? So they're really talking about what they're doing and what they're going to do next with each other. It shows an ability to understand what other people are thinking as they play. So when you are pretending that this is a cup, when you're with somebody else, for example, then you know that whoever you're doing that with also understands that you are pretending. So they know that you know that that's not a real cup, but that you are pretending within that. So you're starting to think about what other people are thinking as you play together. And of course, predicting the feelings or the thoughts of others is a really key skill with communication. And when later on they start to have conversations with other people as they grow up, you need to keep considering those feelings and thoughts of others so that we say the right things and that we do the right things. And that, again, is that bigger picture of that social understanding or social communication, where we're understanding other people. I'm now going to go through the stages of play that children go through. And while I'm talking about these stages, I want you to consider what level of play your child is at. So what kinds of things your child is doing when they're playing. So the first thing that we see children doing is a stage called relational play. And this is where children start to make links between objects or think about what items go together. So they might say, put a cup into a spoon, or a real spoon going into a real cup, or that they might be building a tower by putting bricks on top of each other, or perhaps putting sand into a bucket with a spade. So they're putting the things together, which makes sense. And the next part of play that children go through is called the early pretend stage, or pre-symbolic stage. So remember I talked about symbolic play earlier, where they're pretending something is something else. And in this early pretend play, children are still using realistic props to where a child copies the actions of other people that they've seen other people doing. So they might be doing things like brushing their hair, or washing a doll's face, feeding a doll, or even moving a toy car, or moving a toy dinosaur, moving it around. So there's the toys that they're picking up, or the items they're picking up, are still very realistic and look a lot like the real objects as they play, and they're acting out little sequences of things that they've seen other people doing in real life. The next stage is called symbolic play, and this is where their pretend play becomes a little bit more advanced, and instead of just doing a single action of brushing Teddy or whatever, they are using a whole sequence of actions. So they might be cooking, pretending to cook by stirring something and then pouring it onto a plate and then pretending to eat it. Or they might actually be talking to their toys, or giving the characters voices, so getting the characters to talk from their perspectives. And at this point, they're starting to use objects that look similar to the real thing. So it might be that they're using miniature items, or still items that look a little bit like the objects that are real. And then lastly, they will go through a stage called advanced symbolic or socio-dramatic play. And at this stage, children are using really imaginative play skills. They're acting out whole scenarios of things happening, like going to the doctors or going to the shops to buy things. And it's often with other people, where other people are taking on different roles within that play. And often, instead of using objects, they're actually starting to use actions rather than real objects. So this is where they might be pretending that they're drinking, or pretending to pay, and they're doing a gesture or an action rather than using a real object. And they start to realize that the objects are no longer needed as much because they can pretend that they are there instead. So from me talking about this, I want you to now take your action plan again and look at the section where it says, what stage of play is my child at? So I want you to write down whether you think they're at one of these 4 stages. And then the next slide we're going to look at is about how we can support your child to move on to that next stage, depending on where they're at the moment. So stop the video and come back in a minute. So how can we help with developing your child's play skills? Firstly, we want to use these strategies on this slide to get your child to feel comfortable playing alongside another adult. If we go into their play and try to develop or change what they're doing straight away, they may feel threatened or may rather play by themselves. And you may have found already that it's hard to direct your child's attention to do something that you want them to do. So at this point, our overall aim is to increase the amount of communication that you have with your child. And to do this, we want you to join in with what their interests are. And this means that they're going to play with the toys that they've chosen for longer and will stay alongside you for longer. So how can we get them to play alongside us, and what do we need to do? First of all, we need to watch what your child does and see what they're interested in and how they are communicating. And like I've said, the more interested they are in something, the more likely they are to communicate about it, and they'll be interested in it for longer. So we will be sitting alongside them and watching, first of all. The next thing we need to do is wait. And waiting is so important when it comes to interacting with your child. Your child needs time to listen to what they are saying themselves, and also to what we are saying. Perhaps if we have made a comment about something, they need to wait and process what is going on around them. And what's important is to try to wait 10 seconds. Practicing 10 seconds is really tricky because it feels like a really long time and an unnaturally long time. You might find your child doesn't need as long as that, or they might need a bit longer, or actually that your child might lose interest and wander off if you wait a full 10 seconds. So you need to watch your child closely to see how long you need to wait for. But what you're waiting for is for your child to do something, to interact with you, because it might be that just by sitting and waiting for them to interact, they may initiate something with you. However, when we've tried other things like going in and modeling play, or showing them what to do, or getting them to do something that we want to do, that hasn't worked, and it hasn't given them that motivation to start to interact with us. So whilst we're waiting, the best way is to watch and wait is to get face to face. And this means that we can pick up on the subtle ways that they're communicating to us. So it might be that they're just giving us a flicker of eye contact. They might just look up at us. They might just look at our hands to see what we're doing, or whether we're playing with something. And that might be their way of starting to initiate with us and share what they are doing with us. So getting face to face means getting on their level and facing each other. If possible, you could sit your child on your knee, or maybe even lie down next to them, or really lean over them while they're playing. But we want to try and get that eye contact with them on the floor or at a table, wherever they're sitting. And also remember to listen to their communication. So what we mean by this is interpret any kind of communication that they are using with us. So we need to interpret any body movements or any gesture, sounds or words that they're using, to see whether they're using any of that to try to communicate to us or get us to join in with them. And whatever they're doing, we want to interpret what they're doing as the fact that they are trying to communicate with us. And we might interpret that by maybe copying it back. So the next section there says join in with the child's play. So trying to copy their actions or words or non-verbal communication that they're using. So if they act out a gesture, we might copy their gesture. If they're pushing a car, we might push a car too. I'd say what is really important is to have a duplicate toy. So if they've got a car that they're pushing, you go and get a different car and push that too. If they are building a brick tower, you get your own bricks and try to build your tower next to them. If you try to use the toys that they've got, or the toys that they see as theirs, they might not be happy about that, and they might not want you to join in and be with them, because they might start to feel threatened with what you're doing, or may feel that you're trying to interfere with what you're doing. So you've been playing with your child, alongside your child, and you've been watching, waiting, and imitating what they're doing. And the next thing to do will be to add something else to what they're doing, to develop the next play level. And you'll be modeling activities based on where they're currently at, to move them on. Sorry, modeling activities at the next play level to model what they could be doing further. So, for example, if your child is currently at the relational play stage where they're joining items together, or connecting things together, so, or maybe they're enjoying things like water play and splashing or pouring water from one cup to another, you might think, what familiar routine is this like? And you need to think about what that child has an experience of, and really think about those real life experiences from their perspective. So have they been to a post office? Have they been to a restaurant? Or what have you been doing recently that you can then act out together and play together? So for going back to the water play, if they're enjoying pouring water from one thing to another, you might want to get out some pretend play toys that you can play in that water. So within that situation, you can think of filling a cup with water and then pretending to drink out of that cup. Or it might be that there is a dinosaur in that water, or a character that can be in that water that you can also then pretend to feed in that water. So you're using items that are very similar to real items, so real cups or a pretend baby or a character, and you're acting out that familiar routine that they have seen lots and lots of times. What's important with all of this pretending is that we start to use language with the child about the fact that we are pretending. So saying to the child, let's pretend that, or while we're acting out those familiar routines, we're telling them that we're pretending. So as we're feeding the baby, we could be saying, baby's not really eating, baby's pretending. Or Teddy's not building the tower, he's pretending. So as we move on to the symbolic play, we're still going to be starting with those toys that are realistic and imitating what the child is doing, but then we might want to start adding character voices depending on what they're doing. Or we might want to start to pretend that an item represents something else. So if you've got a skipping rope, perhaps you could use that skipping rope as a pond, or maybe instead of using a real playhouse for your characters, that you use a cardboard box instead. So you're showing them that an item can represent something else. Or in fact, you could use nothing, which is that next stage. So saying that the children are going into the house, but the children aren't actually going into anything. But again, using that language, let's pretend they're going in the house. At this particular stage, some children may find it difficult to take on your ideas because they like to do things in a certain way. And what I would say is that we have imitated their play. We've tried to join in with their play in that way, but we need to add something new, and we may need to keep it going in a fun way and not give up. So be persistent in what we're adding to what they're doing. So for example, they might want to keep pushing their car around or train around a track, or maybe keep doing keep putting a little man up and down some stairs. But what we want to do is keep going with, oh no, and now the man wants to go somewhere else, let's pretend he's now hungry. So or put another toy in place of, oh dear, there's a banana in the way. So that we're adding something fun and motivating for the child. And that's the thing, that whatever it is that we add, it has to be something that the child will think is funny or exciting. And then moving on to the advanced symbolic or sociodramatic play. This is where the children are, oops, sorry, I've moved on here. We're starting to really see that the child is, well, we're wanting them to develop quite advanced play where they're acting out whole scenarios. And at this point, if your child's still at the symbolic play stage, we want to add something to what they're doing. So we might be creating a problem for them to solve, or add something new to what they're already doing. So for example, if they are continuing to just feed the baby with the spoon, then we might need to say, oh no, there's no food left. Or if they keep just making the dinosaur walk, then we want to introduce another character and say, we need to escape from the other dinosaur. So in that, we're making other suggestions of things they can do to take the plot forward a little bit. And we can talk about how the story could end or what could happen next. It might be that we even disagree with something that they've done, or provide an idea that they can discuss with you, which is then going to really help them to learn about negotiation skills. It might be that you want to take on different roles or swap roles within that. So you'd say, I'll do this role now, and then it will be your turn again afterwards. So again, if they want to do the same things over and over, you might want to add something new or a new idea to make that plot more exciting. So now I'd like you to go back to your care plan again, and where you've added what stage of play your child is currently up to, I would like you to now think about what you could do based on what they like doing to move them on to that next play stage. So what toys could you get out for them, and in what situations could you do this particular play in? And then once you've done that, you can move on to the next stage of the training.